Welcome. This is Jordan with Foodbevy, the online community for food and beverage founders. And today I'm talking with Melissa Kalimov, COO of Rise Brewing Co. Melissa, let's jump right into it. I'd love for you to give me a little bit of background on the product and how you got started.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So Rise Brewing Co., we were founded, roughly 5 years ago now. And we started in New York City. Honestly, one of our co-founders started brewing in his East Village apartment, started putting together different bean combinations and just walking around to bars and restaurants, having friends taste the product. And people just kind of kept asking him to make more. And one day walked into a restaurant in Brooklyn, and I think their espresso machine had broken. And they were like, "This is great. You're the coffee guys. Can you guys fix our espresso machine?" And it was him and one of my other co-founders. And they were like, "We have absolutely no idea how to fix an espresso machine, but we can solve your problem in a different way. And what we can do is they had, I think, 15 beer lines. We're like, if you give us one beer line, what we can do is we can replace that with nitro coffee. You can have coffee on draft. You can have it regularly. You can have it at a consistent format and a consistent flavor and taste, and serve it much faster." And they were like, "Great, that sounds awesome. We'd like 2 kegs, please." And we backed away slowly, being like, sure, we can do that. It was a Wednesday, and at the time we were producing 8 cups of coffee every 8 hours or so. So not quite a scalable business. So 2 all-nighters later, brought 2 kegs through the subway to Brooklyn, launched in that restaurant, and that's how the company was born. And from there, it's essentially kind of been a story of customer pull and of saying yes to things that perhaps we weren't even ready for. So the next Monday, a woman walked into the restaurant, tried the coffee, same thing, reached out to us, and she was like, "This coffee's incredible. How do I get it in my office?" And we were like, "Of course we can set it up in your office." We jerry-rigged a kegerator, which is kind of like what you'd imagine you'd find in a frat house, which is now much more common in offices, but at the time was a unit you really didn't find. And set it up with our nitro cold brew in their office. I think in that office we actually set up a voting sheet on the kegerator as well, because they were thinking of it as a temporary thing. And enough of the employees kind of like wrote on the sheet, like, "We must keep this. It must stay in our office," that the office decided to keep it. And then again, I think it was a customer facing firm. So they had their clients come into the office, try the coffee, and then want to bring it back to their own office. So that's honestly really how we started, was get the product in front of people and just have it kind of spin on itself, and sell itself. Because that's, I think I mentioned this when we first met, that's one of the joys of building this business has been, is that people really like it. We made a product that we thought tasted good, started just getting people to taste it. And then it kind of sells itself once we can get people to sample it and to try it. So after we were in a handful of offices, I would say we went from 0 to 100 offices that summer, in I think 2.5 months. And I started getting people calling me, saying like, "Hey, I love this. I'm addicted. I drink it Monday through Friday. Where the heck can I get it on the weekends?" And so I always joke that we built the can in order to chase people home. So we launched the can in August of that year. We're particularly good at launching products at the end of summer, which is a skill that I would like us to grow out of, given that we're a cold brew company. And we launched our original black, and it immediately just flew on shelves. And what we realized was that we had this army of just rabid fans in New York City dying to grab our product. And that office channel was an incredible marketing space for us to kind of leverage into the grocery store channel. So saw hockey stick growth through the end of the winter there. And again, started launching distributors, mostly in the New York tri-state area. And our distributors started coming to us, and they're like, "This product is moving incredibly. We'd really like you to launch new flavors." And so I'm going to jump around a little bit here, but we've been working on lattes forever, just because that's kind of where your head goes to. And lattes are a huge part of our story today. But figuring out what the perfect latte is a hard thing. Like, every one of our co-founders, we all had different opinions about what the perfect latte should taste like, and what the perfect milk should be for that latte. And so what we landed on loving first, actually, was a lemonade nitro cold brew and a blood orange nitro cold brew. Those were the first 2 flavors that we launched. And I'll never forget, one of my co-founders called me, and he's like, "Melissa, I have just tasted the most delicious thing I've ever tasted. Lemonade and our coffee." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You got to come to the brewery and try it." And I did, and it tasted like an Arnold Palmer, but with a little bit more caffeine. It was kind of like a half tea, half lemonade kind of approach. And then the blood orange was a little bit more of like a mature version of that. It had like a little bit, the chocolatey notes came out a little bit more. And it reminded me of those like dark chocolate orange balls that I used to get for Christmas. Anyway, we launched those and we loved them. And I would say like some customers loved them. And the majority of customers were like, what is this?
I was gonna say
And
because like citrus and coffee,
yeah,
in
it
terms of
sounds
like,
terrifying.
it sounds bad. I'm sure it tastes really good, but that's like must be a huge hurdle to actually educate people on like a citrus and coffee blend.
Huge hurdle, and a huge hurdle for a small startup, right? Like we were just getting credibility as having incredible coffee, and then we were trying to like train people to try this like crazy thing that even I was like, this is, you know, crazy the first time my co-founder told me about it. And so it was fascinating because when we were at trade shows, when we were at events, we get so many false positives because if we had the opportunity to tell people what it tastes like, hey, it tastes like tea or tastes like coffee, or like it's almost like a energy drink version of like of a juice, people would be like, oh, I get it, and then they'd try it and they'd like it. If you tried it without knowing what to expect, you'd be so confused. And I tested it with some friends. They were like, I think this coffee went bad because it's very like acidic forward and it was very juice forward. And the customer just didn't know what they should be expecting. And so we only kept that product on shelf. I think we ended up keeping it for like almost 2 years because we loved it so much. Like even today, and even customers still write in today, we sunsetted it over a year ago, possibly almost 2 years ago now. And people are like, where's the lemonade coffee? Like I bought like 10 cases to store in my garage because at the last grocery store I found it and I can't find it anywhere else because there's other people like us in the world. But we realized that, you know, part of being entrepreneurs and part of being a kind of like a taste leader and trying new things is also being willing to say like, all right, the customer wasn't ready for this. And like being able to walk away from things that you love. So we sunsetted the citrus and then finally figured out how to align on a latte. So we launched 3 lattes at once, actually. We launched an oat milk latte, which was our #1 favorite. We run a couple cafes in New York. And so we kind of test different milks with our clientele who walked in and realized that there was definitely a ton of people drinking dairy, but there were also like more people really gravitating towards our non-dairy options.
And this was at the
milk,
beginning of like oat milk becoming a thing, right?
yeah, actually, I think the copywriter for Oatly lived above our cafe. And so he would come down and be like, this is so great. Like, have you tried our oat milk? And so we tested Oatly at the very beginning and a handful of other oat milks. And we offered them to the cafe and we realized that was something that we loved. It had the creaminess of cashew milk. I'm like, again, we've tried every alt dairy milk. Creaminess of cashew, but then it had like the more sustainability factors, so it kind of beat out almond in that way. And it just felt like better for you. It really had all the features of a non-dairy milk that we loved. Fewer allergens because it's not a nut milk, et cetera, et cetera. But there wasn't an organic oat milk on the market. And so that delayed us even further because we were looking for how do we, organic is just one of our core brand mantras. Like we've never launched a non-nitro coffee, not to say we won't down the road. We've never launched a non-organic product. And I think that is one that we really are going to hold to. And so no one at the time had an organic oat milk. So it took us a little bit longer. We had to find farms and find ingredients that were certified organic. And so we ended up making our own organic oat milk in order to bring that oat milk latte to market. So because we did that, we also wanted to leverage it in another product. So our mocha, which kind of tastes like a caffeinated Yoo-hoo. It's like a very chocolate forward mocha. It's so damn good. That is also made with our oat milk. So it's a non-dairy SKU. And then the last thing we did, which is a little unorthodox, is we launched a classic latte as well. And that one's made with organic milk. And what we wanted to do was what we realized that there is an alt dairy drinker, but there's also like a classic dairy drinker. And the two products have a very different taste profile. I find like you truly get the oatiness of our oat milk in the oat latte. And then the classic latte to me almost has like a caramelly taste to it. So it's that one I describe as a healthier for you Frappuccino. So those are the next 3 flavors that we launched. We also switched from a 12-ounce can And our original black in that format had 330 milligrams of caffeine. So a heck of a lot of caffeine in that can. And we downsized it to a 7 ounce. So it's a 200 milligram serving. So it really is like, feels like the more appropriate dose. Again, we were having friends saying like, I'm trying to move your product off the shelves, but I can't finish the last couple sips. And when you're paying, for those cans, it was a $4 can. Our 7 ounce cans are now $2.99 on shelf. You're paying for a good can of coffee and you want to get that value. And we wanted the customer to really feel like they were drinking the entire value of what they were purchasing. So that drove the format change. And then we also changed from a refrigerated can to a shelf stable can. So it was able to open up e-commerce, Amazon, and just kind of like national shipping and national distributors. And then more recently, we've had a prolific new flavor year. We just launched actually organic oat milk. We decided to bring it to a Tetra Pak format because so many people asked for it. They were like, we love this latte. Where's which oat milk did you use? And we were like, we made our own. And they were like, okay, great. Can I have it? And so we finally decided to say yes. Last week, actually, we just launched a London Fog, which is a nitro Earl Grey. So the first nitro tea on the market, which we're super excited about. And then coming up, we actually have 3 more flavors launching this year. So I'll give you the kind of like the early scoop. It's a chocolate and a vanilla oat milk in a Tetra Pak. So to kind of match that on shelves. And then an oat milk vanilla latte can.
I love that entire story because it really shows how early on you were figuring out like what was going to be really core to the brand, and then leverage your conversations with consumers to really lead the way forward in terms of the products and the flavors that you ended up coming out with. And some worked and some didn't, but you definitely like leaned on consumers to really understand what they were looking for and being able to bring those products to market. And it all feels like very core to your brand at the same time. So definitely kudos to that. And then slight pivot. So I always want to hear about like what your story looked like at the beginning of this year, because I know it's been a little bit of a roller coaster. So I know you started off with a lot of offices and growing there, and when COVID hit, offices closed. But how has your business been affected during the first couple months of the year and throughout the year through the pandemic?
Yeah, so I would say everyone was touched, and we were certainly very much part of that. So about probably like a quarter to a third of our business was in the office channel and the food service channel, and that went from 100 to 0 overnight. So not an insignificant hit to our business. At the same time, though, we were in a lot of really new, powerful grocery chains, and those grew a double-digit percentage. So that was certainly helpful. And grocery is our fastest growing segment. It's our largest segment. And so that certainly helped us to shift. And then the last thing is, again, this is like the story of the industry right now, because we had shifted that shelf stable can, we really were able to capitalize on the e-commerce play as well. And so what we did, I would say the other thing that was the biggest challenge for us was that we started in Q1 really staffing up for a big in-person focused year. The history of our company, as sort of what you just spoke to, is we're very customer centric and we're very experience centric. So we want people to touch and taste the cans. We want to talk to people. We run cafes. Like, we want to be there in person. And so we had hired out a big field marketing team. We'd hired out a big field sales team. And all of a sudden we had a fleet of people who were supposed to be in person doing and selling and marketing that no longer could. And so a couple of the things that we did right away was essentially kind of like rebrand, and I've still rebranded our field marketing team to this, from a field marketing to a sampling team. Because you can still get people to figure out how to try the coffee by sending them a case. One of the biggest initiatives we did is we've donated almost 100,000 cans to hospitals and frontline healthcare workers across the country. And it was one of those things where like, it's something we can actually do. Like, it is helpful to caffeinate doctors. And there's not, we're selling coffee. We're not the ones in the medical field. And so like, there's days when I feel like we can't make a change, but this was actually one of those areas that I felt like we could actually provide a utility that was helpful. And at the same time, there's self-serving aspects to it, right? We were able to sample people in a genuine way and get people to try the product that might not have otherwise tried the product. And so converting that essentially instead of people running, setting up tents at 5Ks, going into offices and sampling offices, setting up at community fairs, just plugging in kind of all over in-person events where we typically do. We really try to get creative about how can we plug in digitally, and then also how can we help, and let that kind of like feed our goals as well. And then I think the other piece is that we really, while we thought about that office channel, being that the office channel remains important for us, but it's just, you touch them differently right now. We're all working from home. And so instead of setting up kegrators in people's offices, what we've been doing is reaching out direct to the office manager and saying, hey, here's a discount code if you want to send it to your 100 employees, and get it into their hands. It's different because people are buying for themselves rather than receiving it as an office perk. But that's something that we were able to offer, as well as just like taking a little bit of a margin hit, but still getting you still want to caffeinate the workers, you still want to build their love and their fandom. And I think really like engaging the super fans and staying in that channel was important to us.
I love that, and how you've been able to pivot and find new ways of reaching people so they can still try the product in this world that we live in. And then based on, you've been doing this for a little while. I know you've seen the roller coaster of things running the business back and forth. And if you could give one piece of advice to an entrepreneur in the food space and beverage space who's starting up, what would you tell them?
Oof. First of all, like any words that I give aren't as important as the person believing in themselves. I think that starting a company is one of the most emotional things that I think we as a co-founding team have ever done. It's very personal. I will say one thing is that I always tell people who earlier in their career is like, make sure to like figure out how to pay yourself in a way that you can afford your rent and groceries. Because then if you don't pay yourself for too long, it feels too much like you're sacrificing your child's future college education instead of focusing on building the business. And if you're looking for investors, your investors, if they are savvy, should know that. They want a CEO and an executive team to be focused on what's going to drive the business forward and acting out of kind of confidence on that front, rather than acting out of fear of how am I going to pay my rent. And I think that's a very specific thing, but I think that is something that I think particularly people very early in their company are like, yeah, here's my deck, here's who I'm going to hire, but they don't put their salary, even a minimal one, in there. And I at least personally think that that's important, because I think it allows people who don't have family means or whatever it may be to start businesses, because it does, you need to pay to get a roof over your head. So anyway, that's a very specific one. But the other piece I think is just either have a co-founding team or hire a team that you really believe in, that's going to bring as much strength to the table as you do, because you want someone in the trenches with you. And I think like those first few people that you sit around the table with you, they're going to define your culture. They're going to define your bar of what success looks like, and your bar of how to like hold yourself to a standard and then hold your future employees to a standard. So I think that the core initial team that you bring in really does define the future. And if you make a mistake in it, don't be afraid to make changes. We're not perfect, and not every person is a fit. Doesn't mean they're a bad person or a bad employee. It just means that like it wasn't the perfect fit for you guys at that moment in time. That was not one thing. That was like that was like 18 pieces of thoughts. But there you go.
No, those are very much great pieces of advice. Melissa, COO of Rise Brewing Co. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.